When I first played with Huawei's new P20 Pro, I was cautiously optimistic. With its gorgeous glassy shell and insane triple camera, it seemed, if nothing else, like a beautiful curiosity that would be fun to play with for a while. After spending a few weeks with the phone, however, I changed my mind. The P20 Pro is more than just a curiosity. It's one of the year's truly great Android phones. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but can we just take a moment to look at this thing? Our review unit obviously has that blue and purple gradient finish that Huawei is so proud of, and with good reason. It's absolutely stunning. This twilight finish won't work for everyone, but damn it, it works for me. This is just the kind of different I'd like to see more of from smartphone makers. Huawei's build quality is downright excellent too. When it comes to construction, I would put the P20 Pro right up there with the iPhones and the Galaxies of the world. That said, I've had this phone for a couple weeks and it's already showing a fair share of nicks on the front and back. It's an unavoidable truth that a phone without a case is going to get a little messed up, but honestly, there is no way that I could put a phone like this into a case. At the very least, the whole body is rated IP67 for water and dust resistance, though it does, sadly, lack a headphone jack. The front of the phone can't help but be less striking by comparison, but there's still a lot going on here. Huawei went with a 6-inch AMOLED screen running at 2240 by 1080, and there's honestly not a whole lot to write home about here. Colors were bright and accurate, and the blue cast that sometimes affects OLED displays wasn't an issue here. Really, I just wish it was a little brighter. It's perfectly fine indoors, but it's finally starting to get nice out in New York City, and the screen is sometimes tough to see in broad daylight. Meanwhile, the screen's oddball proportions have proven to be pretty helpful. The 18.7:9 aspect ratio means it's a little more than twice as tall as it is wide. That decision makes the phone really comfortable to hold onto for long periods of time, and it gives you some flexibility when it comes to the notch. Like it or not, 2018 is the year of the notched smartphone screen. In this case, the notch houses a 24-megapixel front-facing camera, which I'll get into more a little bit later. Because the screen has that slightly longer than usual aspect ratio, you can actually toggle a setting to hide the notch entirely and still see everything you need to on the screen. Personally, I think the notch is a small price to pay for having near edge-to-edge displays, but it's nice to have the option just in case you hate them on principle. Beneath all of that, you'll find a fingerprint sensor that does a whole lot more than just quickly unlock the phone. It works well enough at that, don't get me wrong, but it also pulls double duty as a navigation tool if you let it. If you're like me and you want to make use of every possible iota of screen space, you can assign the controls for going back, going home, and launching recent apps to taps and swipes of that home button. I don't think it's quite as elegant or intuitive as the iPhone X's gesture controls, but they get the job done just fine. Inside the phone, things are a little more conventional, or at least as conventional as Huawei's Pro phones get. The P20 Pro packs the same Kirin 970 chipset with the neural processing unit as Huawei's Mate 10 Pro, not to mention the same 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. All told, we're still working with a chipset from last year, so the P20 Pro is not as effortlessly quick as some of the phones with Snapdragon 845s we've already tested. Some apps also have a tendency to run slightly choppier here than on other phones we've tested recently, though that might be because of underlying software issues Huawei needs to iron out. Overall though, the P20 Pro still packs enough power to handle most tasks without breaking a sweat. Just don't expect flawless performance when you break out the heavy-duty games. Intense titles like PUBG Mobile occasionally felt choppy, though not to the point of frustration. On the software front, the P20 Pro runs Android 8.1 Oreo, painted over with the latest version of the company's EMUI interface. I'll be honest, it wasn't that long ago that I hated EMUI and basically everything it stood for. To my surprise though, EMUI is slowly but surely becoming a pleasure to use. As with a lot of other interfaces on Chinese smartphones, the whole thing can feel a little overwrought, with gobs of features and add-on apps that serve to remind you that we're a long way from stock Android country. Even so, there's a palpable sense that Huawei is trying to be more thoughtful with the software it sticks on its phones, and I appreciate that. Let's be honest though, you're probably here to learn more about Huawei's absolutely ridiculous Leica triple camera. We're looking at a whopping 40-megapixel main camera with an f1.8 aperture, a 20-megapixel monochrome camera to help capture those finer details, and an 8-megapixel telephoto camera for those long-range shots. Normally, I would have thought this was a classic case of overkill, and maybe it is. That said, the way these three cameras seamlessly come together to provide one fabulous shooting experience is really something special, and the rest of the world's smartphone makers should take note. As always, there's a robust pro mode with lots of fiddly, fine-grained features if you already know exactly how to capture the shot you're looking for. For everyone else though, there's Huawei's Master AI. Think of it as an artificially intelligent auto mode. Huawei has trained the P20 Pro to be able to identify hundreds of different shooting scenarios and adjust the camera's settings accordingly. After all, a photo of a sunset shouldn't be treated the same way as a portrait or an urban landscape. The P20 Pro's triple camera does a great job capturing detailed, nicely exposed photos by itself, but I was thankful to have that AI assist just about every time it popped up. The modified photos that come out on the other end usually depict a bolder, more idealized version of what's in front of the camera, and while that might not be for everyone, it's been a lot of fun to see the world through the P20 Pro's three eyes. At times though, the AI assistants can feel a bit like a liability. I've taken my fair share of shots in bars, and I've noticed the camera defaulting to portrait mode when I point the camera at someone, even if the light is too low for it to work properly. The images that came out were very soft around the edges, and the camera inadvertently blurred out some of the faces in the photos too. This is not limited to bars and low light situations, so this is something to be mindful of. On paper, Huawei's Master AI sounds like the auto mode of the future, and it often works as well as advertised. The thing is, it's typically so helpful that when it does occasionally flounder, it can be really frustrating. There's an option to disable the feature altogether in the camera settings, but there really should be an easier way to toggle the AI from the camera screen itself. While the AI can activate it when necessary, we need to talk more specifically about the P20 Pro's night mode. It's absolutely spectacular. You can check out our full written review for more insight into how it actually works, but long story short, night mode captures multiple images over the course of 4 seconds and combines them into a single shot. They're not exactly long exposures, they're just multiple images stitched together. The results are mostly noise-free, surprisingly bright, and packed with a lot more detail than I expected to see considering I was shooting in the middle of the night. To be fair, the results aren't always perfect. If you're snapping a landscape that has people milling around in it, expect those people to look blurry in the finished product. And while it works very well in really dark, and I mean really dark, conditions, the difference in quality between a night mode shot and a regular auto mode photo is a lot harder to spot when there's at least some ambient light. Considering just how well this feature works though, these minor stumbles are pretty easy to live with. And of course, those three cameras come together for what Huawei calls hybrid zoom. Zooming in up to 3 times is all optical, but once you hit 5 times zoom, the camera is combining data from the 40 megapixel and 8 megapixel sensors. It's not exactly lossless, but it's a lot closer than I would have expected, and it actually makes the zoom on the P20 Pro worth using. That's not something I can say about a lot of smartphones out there. I also appreciated the ability to take what's called an ultra snapshot. By whipping the phone out of your pocket and double tapping the volume down button, you can take a photo in as little as 0.3 seconds, which is ideal for when something is unfolding in front of you and you just have to get that photo now. Huawei's ambitious rear camera doesn't get everything right, but you know what? I honestly can't remember the last time I had this much fun shooting with a smartphone. The P20 Pro camera's blend of fine-grained controls, helpful features, and AI wizardry really feels like something special, and it's enough to make me consider giving up on the Pixel 2 altogether for smartphone photos. Rounding out the package is a 24 megapixel front-facing camera, which is honestly a bit much. I mean, who really needs to see their own face with that much clarity? The usual beauty mode features are there to digitally airbrush your face's trouble spots, but again, portrait mode's results can be hit or miss. The experience is fine, don't get me wrong, but considering the work Huawei put into making its rear camera special, a little more nuance for the front camera would have been nice. That front-facing camera is also what you'll use to authenticate yourself if you're a fan of face unlock features. Huawei's approach is more like OnePlus's than Apple's, in that there's no real technical trickery here. The phone just captures visual data from your face and checks against that data when you log in. That means it works very, very quickly, but it also lacks the sort of rigor you'd want for really secure situations. As a result, you can't use your face to buy apps in the Play Store or anything, it's only for getting into your phone. Ultimately, Huawei's approach to the P20 Pro wasn't just ambitious, it was audacious, and the end result is a truly impressive flagship device. It has its flaws and its foibles, sure, but The company's thoughtfulness across the board make the P20 Pro an undeniably worthy rival to just about any high-end smartphone out there. It sucks that we in the United States will never be able to walk into a store and buy one, but for everyone else around the world, the P20 Pro is 100% worth your attention.